Hi and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So I had a question about maxYMiser, so I thought I would answer it. The question came from a viewer and I forget who it is, so apologies, otherwise I'd have given you a shout out. But the question was, what is this business here with the, this grid? Can you explain that? And the answer is yes, I can explain that. So in fact, I have sort of already gone through it in my original maxYMiser instrument editor tutorials, but only sort of tangentially. I never really addressed it specifically. So let's start. So what I like to call that part of the instrument editor is the detune matrix. And what it does is allow you to patch different frequency adjustments, if you like, to different parts of the sound, or not patch them, if you like. Now, as we know, there are 4 components to a sound in maxYMiser, so just to go through those again. The first one, the main one, is the square wave. There is the noise. There's the buzzer, and finally the timer, 4 components. Now you can adjust the frequency of the noise, but I wouldn't describe the noise as being a tuned part of the sound. So that just leaves 3 components, which is the square wave, the buzzer, and the timer. And you can see those listed on the top of the detune matrix here. And then down the side we have frequency adjustments. So things that can change the frequency of the sound are portamento or the slide effect. You can access those with an effects command. It could be arpeggio, a vibrato, a transpose command, which is another effect command which you can access in the tracker. There's a fixed frequency, so you can have the particular component not responding to the notes you play and just always playing the same fixed frequency. And finally there is a fixed det, which is fixed detune really, which you can set up here. So let's try each of those individually, and then you can hear what kind of cool stuff you can make. So we'll just create a new sound with maximum volume and just the square wave. There we go. So let's say we want to start by, well, let's just go through these in order. Let's do the portamento slide. So I'll create a slide here in the tracker. The portamento is with the P command, and then you put a number in for the speed. Now you can hear that didn't work. That's because we haven't enabled the portamento on the square wave, so I'm going to click that. And now the portamento is patched into the square wave. Let's listen. Brilliant. Now the other thing you can do is a slide, which is effect command H and then a speed. You don't need to have a target note, you can just launch straight into it like I've just done there. So again, if I disconnect the portamento from the square wave, it won't slide. So the next one is arpeggio. So there's two ways to create an arpeggio in maxYMiser. The first one is to use a sequence. So I'll press N for a new sequence, then I'll just create a major arpeggio. So we're going through 0, 4 and 7. So if we play that, there won't be an arpeggio. So, no arpeggio. So let's activate that. And we have our major arpeggio. And the other way we can do an arpeggio is in the tracker. So you can use the X command, which stands for extra arpeggio. So I'll put minor arpeggio this time. And you can't hear it because I disabled the arpeggio here. So let me activate that, and then you should hear a minor arpeggio, which is working perfectly. If we want a major, we can just change that to a 4. And so on. It's just a quick way of being able to change the key without needing to change the sequence, although there is a tracker command for that. So that's arpeggio. So arpeggio changes the frequency in intervals of semitones, if you like. So the next one we've got is vibrato. I'll just enable it because I think you get the point now of how this is working. So a vibrato is changing in smaller amounts than the arpeggio, but you can think of it as being the same idea. So I'll just create a little arpeggio, a vibrato, sorry, here. So we go up and then we go down by doing a negative number. So all F's is -1, that's -2. And then we want -4. So E is -2, -3, -4. And then again, the last step. So let's hear what that's done to the sound that we made. You can hear the frequency just vibrating slightly. Let's remove the vibrato. And then with. And it's a cheap way of making your square wave sound a bit bigger and more interesting. It sounds really cool on leads. I think it's an underrated effect these days. Before SID was invented, it was really the only way of creating movement in your square wave. And I think it still sounds pretty good now, actually. So next one is transpose. Now that is only available here in the tracker with the command T. So this is without the transpose. Now you can see I've put in transpose by 3 semitones, so let's enable the transpose and see if we can hear a difference. Yep, that has indeed gone up by 3 semitones. You may wonder what is the point in that, and I'll explain that later. So fixed frequency is an interesting one. Again, you may not see much point in it, but that will be explained. So moment the square wave is able to be played on the keyboard of the Atari, but if I create a fixed frequency, I'm not sure what frequency I'll choose, I'll just put a random one in there. When we enable that, it doesn't matter what note you play, it will always play that fixed frequency. And again, you may question why you'd want to do that, but there are certain effects where that's quite cool. So where I like to use that is for a kick drum sound, which decreases in frequency over time. Now that's repeating, so we'll set the last step to be the end one. Now whatever melody note you play is giving us the same kick drum sound. If you put all Fs in a fixed frequency sequence, it will give us the natural note. Which will allow you to create interesting bass lines with in conjunction with the kick. So we might do something like that. And it's a nice way of keeping your kick drums always the same whilst playing something else at the same time. So that's the fixed frequency. And then the last one which we've got here is the fixed detune, which you can access here with these parameters that I'm highlighting. So there's two components to this. One which is the kind of a coarse adjustment, which is in semitones, and then the fine adjustment, which is in the gwEm frequency increments. So let's just see if we can hear that. I've enabled the detune. You can also go down. You'll just have to take my word for it that I'm playing the same thing each time. And then the fine adjustment, I'll do, that's with and without. Okay, so that's all very well, but it seems a bit pointless to you know, have a whole thing dedicated to that, because, you know, why wouldn't you just have those things on all the time? And if it was just the square wave, then yes, I think you probably would just have them on all the time. But there is more than just the square wave. So far, we've only had the square wave active. Let's add a SID voice, a timer. So 5 is S for SID, or software waveform or whatever, and I will create a timer sequence which is a simple square wave, so F and 0. Now you can hear that classic phasing there, and we know we have the Atari SID voice. We'll just do a portamento so you can hear Now at the moment, as you see, no portamento is switched on. So it goes directly from one note to the other. So let's switch it on only for the square wave. So the square wave will have a portamento, but the timer doesn't. The timer's jumping straight to the new note. And you get a cool sort of ring modulated sound. If we enable the slide portamento for the timer as well, both components are sliding together to the new frequency. So clearly that's sort of a cool sound. Let's try it with a pitch slide. And with the timer moving as well. So this sound, that sound is caused by the square wave sliding, but not the timer. And you get this cool intermodulation between the square wave and the timer. And that is actually the case for all of these. So let's do an arpeggio. It sounds weird because only the square wave is arpeggiating at the moment. Let's include the timer in that. Which is better, that's up to you and your tune. Vibrato is a bit more subtle. But it is quite cool having the square wave moving slowly in and out of tune. You can hear the difference there, but it's very subtle. So this is with only the square wave vibrating. And this is with the square wave and the timer. It's definitely a bit thicker to only have the square wave with the vibrato. Now the transpose will start to make more sense, so let's do a little scale here. That just sounds like this. And now let's include the transpose, but only on the square wave. Sounds the same because we don't have any transpose commands, but we're going to change that now. Now let's hear that. Not the most musical, but it does illustrate exactly what this having the transpose only on the square wave is doing. They're both playing in step with the track, but the square wave is being transposed depending on this tracker command. Maybe if we play the same note only, that will be a bit clearer. Yeah. I'm sure you can make use of that. That is a bit more interesting when you have different waveforms on the timer or even with the buzzer. So I've enabled the fixed detune with 7 as the course amount, which creates a power chord between the square wave and the timer. So without that, and then kicking it in, creates a sort of interesting distortion. And you can do it in fine increments as well. Let's just put it to 4 because you'll definitely hear that. Which sounds cool. And for the fixed frequency, may not be so useful, but you do have that option. So let's just enable the fixed frequency on the square wave only. The start of the note is that kick drum sound that we had. If you remember, it sounded like this. Now if we add the SID, it doesn't have the fixed frequency applied to it, so we have the start sounding a bit different. Which may or may not be your taste. So finally I'll show you some of this stuff with the buzzer, because I think that will explain a bit more about, you know, what's the point in some of this. So although it's a bit less easy to hear what's going on with the buzzer, but let's just enable the buzzer and I'll select waveform 8, which is the sawtooth wave. At the moment, those the buzzer and the square wave are playing together. We've got this sequence here with the transpose. Let's enable that. Sounding good. Now you can hear that when the transpose is set to 0, by the way, the transpose is only being applied to the square wave. You can hear when that is 0, there is a bit more phasing. So we can layer these and add extra transpose to the square wave with the fixed detune, and I'll set that to some number. Let's just set it to 7. Let's layer some more. Let's give the square wave an arpeggio. But I'll do a different one from this one here. I'll do a nice long one. And I'll make it 2 octaves. There we go. Let's listen now. And that is how you can get these acid sounds. Sounds pretty good like that, but I would probably go in and mess and tune it so it sounded even better. Let's try it quickly with the triangle wave, which is A. That's already sounding much better. And if you're innovative, so far I've only been applying these things to the square wave, but we can apply them to any of the components. Let's see what it sounds like with the buzzer. There's a different flavour, might be good for certain things. So that's with these adjustments applied only to the buzzer. And if we apply them to them both, I'm pretty sure it'll sound pretty wild and not very good. Yeah, the magic is gone. And there we are. I think that's covered the detune matrix. I hope you found that useful. Consider liking the video and subscribing to my channel. That would be brilliant. And I'll see you next time.